We're continuing our AI series, and I am pleased to welcome today's speaker, who is one of our own, Inmaculada de Melo-Martin, and she's a co-director of our regulatory core, as well as professor of medicine ethics in medicine and professor of medical ethics in reproductive medicine. And today she's going to speak to us on beyond bias, privacy and safety, and how AI reconfigures our world. Inma, it's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So let me share my screen. One second. Everybody can see the title slide?
Now it looks good.
Mm-hmm.
This one. Yeah, everybody sees the slide?
Yes, see your title.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. So so this is part of the series of AI and ethics. So I thought to do something that is a little bit different than many of the discussions that we have had. And so that's the reason for the title, beyond bias, privacy, and safety. My topic is going to see actually to try to discuss how AI, in the context of the biomedical sciences, actually reconfigures what we do. So this is what I would like to do. So I am going to first talk about what is called the myth of technological value neutrality, the idea that technologies are value neutral, and how this actually makes ethics to be just a risk management tool. That's how we use ethics in that context. I will talk just a little bit about the usual suspects, the privacy, safety, and security. And then I will move on to discuss what other things actually AI does in the context of the biomedical sciences. So let's start with this idea that technologies are value neutral. It's a very common belief. It is rarely defended, explicitly, but it is hard to understand many of the claims that are made about technology without those assumptions, without the assumption that people believe technologies are value neutral. So what does this thesis, this belief actually entail? It takes technologies actually to be beneficial in general and instrumentally valuable. We design technologies to meet particular goals that humans have. They help us achieve those goals, sometimes more efficiently, sometimes goals that we couldn't achieve before. So we build planes to travel faster and farther. We use microscopes to see things that we couldn't see otherwise. So they help us to, again, do things more efficiently or do things that we usually don't do. This thesis actually also entails that technologies can be put to good or bad use. We can use them appropriately or not. For example, you have there the hammer. Hammers can be used to put a picture on the wall or to break someone's skull open. So in both cases, you use the same tool for very different purposes. So again, you can use it in a good way or a bad way. They obviously can have negative effects. That's one of the reasons why we evaluate technologies, to see what potential negative effects they have. So that's part of risk assessment, actually. But under this view, the bad effects are never the result of the technologies themselves. They are the result of human problems, human intentions, bad governance, bad social policies. It is always the actors or the public policies, the ones that are responsible for the bad or negative effects of technologies. Again, we can use genomic medicine to help people who have inheritable diseases, or we can use it to promote eugenic practices. In both cases, the science or the technologies are the same, but they can be used for good or bad purposes. It is not the fault of the technologies, just how we use them, how human beings, how societies use those technologies. So given this, it's not surprising that we see ethics as simply a downstream concern that attempts to manage risks. So that's the point of ethics. That's the reason we discuss in so many cases what are the risks of the technologies and what are the ethical aspects that we can evaluate to assess those risks. So again, this is the context, the overwhelming majority of discussions, again, of technologies in general, and certainly AI, presuppose this conception of technologies. So under this conception, again, the standard critique that is usually raised against AI is completely consistent with the value neutrality thesis. So, for example, again, very briefly, three of the main concerns in the context of AI. One of them is algorithmic bias. So we have diagnostic or predictive bias, problems that are always framed as, the data is dirty or is unrepresentative or is historical. So that's the training data that we use. But the algorithms are neutral, and the fault lies with the human inputs. It is a problem with the data, not with the algorithm. The same about privacy concerns. Obviously, people would use data in an authorized way. They would use it for surveillance purposes. But these are problems of governance or human policies. The technology is still neutral. It's just a repository of data that bad actors can use in inappropriate ways. And the same about accuracy, glitches, safety in the information that is produced. Large language models, for example, produce hallucinations, what I call hallucinations. I think that's a very bad word, but that's how they are called. They have inaccurate information, and this is interpreted as the result of technical unsophistication. The models are yet not good enough, but we will be able to make them better. The system is incomplete still, an incomplete instrument that requires better guardrails, or compliance metrics so that we can ensure accuracy. So all of these requires that actually we focus only on downstream issues. We think about risk mitigation. We try to mitigate those risks by proposing, better training data sets, having privacy protocols, implementing technical safety guardrails. So we try to develop strategies that would prevent these problems from happening. But again, the questions are not about, the technology, the systems. It's just about how we are using them. So again, this is very important. It's not that we are not to consider these issues. I actually teach a course where we discuss these issues because they are obviously very important, particularly in the context of the biomedical sciences. So it's not that we should stop thinking and reflecting on these issues and trying to find out ways to make data more fair, to ensure privacy protections. It is not that we shouldn't do that, it's that this is incomplete. And often, the concerns with these problems blind us to, many other things that technologies do. So I'm going to now show just a little bit about, some of the things that actually technologies do so that we can see what is missing from the usual evaluation, so that we can see that technologies do more than just what they are designed to do. They actually shape access, they shape perception, how we perceive the world, our practical options. They shape our morality, what moral values we have. They do all of those things, and often we don't pay attention to that. So, for example, technologies can mediate access. This is a, normal bridge. One of the things that bridges can do is limit who can or what vehicles can go through in this case. So if you are interested in preventing buses, for example, from crossing, you would ensure that, the ability, the bridge is not high enough for the buses to cross. So something as simple as a bridge can actually change the shape of communities and allow for some people to access certain areas while others cannot. Other technologies, for example, telescopes and microscopes, opened our world to entities that we could not know existed. Okay, so they expand our horizons, they change our perceptions. We are certainly now aware of other worlds that we couldn't have been aware before the telescope. And we certainly are much more concerned with microorganisms than we were before the microscope was developed. We also use technologies that change, like ultrasounds, for example, the prenatal ultrasound. It changed how we saw a fetus. It constituted fetuses as patients, something that was not the case before. Everything happened through a woman. But with this technology, we could now see, we could treat a patient, that was a fetus. The fetus became a patient. Women's bodies became environments where the fetus grows, and those environments can be safer, more or less safe, obviously. So a significant change in our conception of pregnancy, for example. They can also change our morality, our moral values. So, for example, the ability to transplant organs didn't simply, produce a new intervention that allows some people to survive. It changed the way we saw our ability to respond to that. So one of the things it created is, for example, the moral obligation to donate, an obligation that didn't exist before donation, obviously, or transplants were available. And think, for example, of smartphones. one of the things that technologies do is make things easier, some things easier than others. They have affordances, designers call it. They invite, they prompt, they persuade in a variety of ways. So smartphones do those things. So smartphones don't force us not to talk to other people when we are with other people. They simply are so appealing, the constant prompting, the scrolling, the all the images, that is very hard not to pay attention to it. Again, it doesn't prevent us from doing so. It just makes those choices harder, which is one of the things that technologies do. They make some options easier and some harder to do. So these are just some examples, of the many things that technologies do that we're not designed to do. Okay, they have nothing to do with what the purpose of those technologies were. So let's go now to AI and see how actually AI is transforming a variety of aspects in the biomedical sciences, both in the sciences and for the scientists and clinicians. So one of the things that they are transforming is actually how we know. Okay, so one of the things that is often said about data that is being used with AI is that data is raw. We just input raw data into the system and we get certain amount of information. That is certainly not the case. Data is never raw. AI does not access reality directly. It doesn't. It can only learn from data. We can only learn from data that has been already selected, that is measured, that is coded, that is cleaned, that is labeled, standardized, that is made interoperable. So it has already been changed. It has been put in ways that actually, our technologies can access. This requires a significant amount of work by many people to be able to do this. Again, there is no raw data in any meaningful way. So obviously this is very important, the ways in which we conceive of how data is produced, is constructed in many ways, because each of these steps obviously involves decisions about what is relevant, what is measurable, what is comparable, what is usable. All of it are decisions that are made before we can have any access to the data. So in no way are we accessing neutral reality when we are accessing data in the context of AI or obviously in computing in general. So another aspect again of related to this how we know is what counts as truth. This is all again very important in the context of the biomedical, sciences in general, but certainly in the context of the biomedical sciences. So we know that AI can produce outputs that are accurate, that are useful, that are robust, that are clinically beneficial. Okay, so we have certain amount of evidence that this is the case, and this is why we use it, because it can produce these benefits for us. So there are no questions that AI allows us to do things that we couldn't do otherwise in that sense. But this can leave a variety of aspects unclear. So, for example, what has been explained, one of the most significant aspects in science is we don't just seek predictions, we seek explanations. So when we just get a prediction, we don't know the reasons, we don't know the why, we only know the how. We know it works, we don't know why. We might take performance, success, the ability of these technologies to give us the right answers, as justification for belief. So I can believe that this is true simply because it works. We don't know whether the relationships that are found by AI are causal or are correlations, and that obviously makes a difference for our ability to explain. We don't, obviously, the data, it's not, the information that is provided by the data is not true necessarily of the biology. It might be just true of the data set. So that's something also that is left unclear. We don't know what can still be contested by given reasons. Again, this is an essential feature of the sciences. We provide a hypothesis, find evidence, determine whether the hypothesis is correct or not. And we do that by providing justification for our claims, for the beliefs that we have, by explaining. Now, it is true that obviously, we don't have explanations for everything that we do in science. Often we know that a drug works and we are not sure why. But until now, the understanding of the science has been that they are able to provide us both with predictions and with explanations. An explanation is a basic way, obviously, to understand the world. So again, this is important because biomedical science is not just a question of producing some outputs, even when they are accurate. It is a truth-seeking activity, and it is a reason-giving practice. We want not just, again, predictions, we want to know why they are correct. And we certainly want to know that things are true rather than simply chance. So if the ability to predict with success becomes justification, becomes the warrant for our beliefs, then we start thinking that prediction simply is the reason for belief, which might become problem, at least for our understanding of what constitutes knowledge in the biomedical sciences. Now, another aspect that AI also transforms is what we do, obviously, not just how we know, but what we do. So imagine, AI outputs arrive as, risk scores, alerts, classifications, rankings, recommendations, predictive futures. So this is what we get when we use AI. And when we do this, when we get these kinds of outputs, these things, these outputs don't simply describe, they are not just describing the world, if at all, or even the data that they are using. They actually make us do things. They create pressure to monitor, for example, when you have a risk, to treat, to prioritize when you have a ranking, to intervene. So sometimes, they turn obviously healthy people into patients in waiting. They change our conception of health and disease. Again, this is not new. We obviously do this with many other technologies. Genomic science and technologies have been doing that for a while. The issue here is the scale of AI, the power that it has because of the massive amounts of data and the incredibly rapid incorporation into institutions and systems in ways that might prevent us from actually thinking about these things. We haven't had the time to do those kinds of things. So again, it doesn't just do things, those things that it does call for certain kinds of actions. So again, this is important because what becomes actionable, the kinds of things that we can do can become expected. We are expected to do certain kinds of things, required in some contexts. They are certainly difficult to ignore. When we get a recommendation, when we get a risk prediction, and eventually they might become part of the standard of care. So it is important to recognize the ways in which the outputs of AI lead us into particular kinds of behaviors. So another aspect of our reality, our world, that AI is also changing is actually questions about agency and responsibility. So one of the things that often it is said about managing risks that come from AI is that we need to ensure that the human is in the loop, that we keep humans making decisions. So long as we have humans in the loop, we are okay, in some way. Now, the human who is in the loop, if it is not actually the same human in the context of AI. So it is not that AI removes all human judgment, okay? So that humans are now unable to make judgments simply because we are using AI. That's not at all the case. It does, however, change the aspects where judgment is exercised, where is that we can make decisions that are, important. So we can become supervisors, the human can become a supervisor. They can be a validator of recommendations. They can be a manager of exceptions, what happens when, there are exceptions. So we can, the humans can still be making these kinds of judgments. But they are delegating attention or doubt and judgments, they are actually, we are not doing, I don't know why that is clicking the thing. They are delegating attention, our doubts that we might have, at moments of uncertainty. We lose the opportunity to exercise clinical and scientific judgments in many cases, even when we are in the loop. Again, the human is in the loop. So as in the other cases, this is obviously important, in many contexts, but certainly in the context of the biomedical sciences, because, again, being in the loop is not the same as retaining judgment, okay? The kinds of judgments that we are habituated to making in, clinical decision-making, in scientific decision-making, can change in radical ways so that we are still in the loop, but not actually making relevant decisions. Those are made by the AI systems in a variety of ways. Also, another aspect of agency and responsibility is this issue about who has to give reasons in the context of the use of AI? So when AI becomes part of institutional judgment, when it's incorporated into all of our systems practically, the recommendations that it produces actually become the baseline. They become the default. Okay, so we get those recommendations, and those recommendations become the default. So before AI, for example, the clinician was making recommendations and judgments. They justified why they were making a recommendation, explaining why those recommendations were appropriate. To patients, scientists, obviously in the context of science. But with reliable AI, the clinician must justify actually not the taking the recommendation, because that's the default, but the departing from the recommendation. If you have a recommendation from an AI system that says do X, and the clinician or the scientist just for some reason think that that's not quite right, now the burden of proof has changed. It has shifted. You now have to justify why you are not following the recommendation in a context where the AI is usually reliable, very reliable even. So it's very hard, it's very costly to actually make those changes justified why we are not doing. So that means that it is quite likely that we would become dependent on the judgments that AI makes. It's easier to defer to AI, and it requires courage, obviously, to not do so when one thinks that it's wrong. And again, this is very costly, because if you make a decision that is contrary to what the AI system says, and you are wrong, you are liable. You are going to be asked to give justifications for why you didn't follow the recommendation. But if the AI is wrong and you just follow the recommendation, the responsibility is diluted, because you just follow what the AI says. And, the AI obviously is not responsible. The responsibility is distributed in a variety of ways so that it's easier to do so. This is what is called the responsibility gap, which is very significant, again, in the context of the biomedical sciences. So although responsibility, remains obviously with the clinician or with the scientists, and this would be the case even when the decisions are shaped by systems that they did not design and they cannot fully inspect or understand. So this is the issue of the responsibility gap. I am being held responsible or accountable for something that I didn't create, I didn't design, and I cannot understand. So this is, one of the problems in ethics that is actually being studied. How we are going to be assigning questions of attributing a responsibility and accountability in a context like this. So all of these aspects, obviously, are significant, for many reasons. But one of them is that what successful AI does is makes things normal, make many things normal. So seeing data as reality, success as justification, prediction as an obligation, an obligation to act in particular ways. assistance, the assistance that AI provides actually as dependence, because we cannot explain or justify what AI is giving us. And so we have, again, responsibility without full control. This is normalized so that we cannot actually see it. We cannot see what the problems might be in this context. So again, this is important because when things become normal, when all of these things become normal, they are difficult to see, they are difficult to challenge, they are difficult to confront in ways that allow us to change them or to find strategies that would help us make things better. Now, again, I want to emphasize that all of the things that I am discussing presuppose that AI works appropriately. Okay, so it's not a question of bias or safety. It is a question of thinking, what do technologies do when they go right, rather than just what do technologies do when they go badly, which is how we usually think about these problems. That's the reason we do the risk management, once the technologies are implemented. But here, all of this is assuming that AI works properly and that is helpful in all of the ways that it is helpful. So this again presupposes that AI is doing what it's supposed to be doing in a right way rather than in problematic ways. So because again we don't see these things, we cannot when they become normal, again there's no friction. One of the things that help us challenge or confront things is when there is friction. But when things are the norm, there is no friction. So it's very difficult to obviously perceive those. That reality, it's just our reality. So one of the things that I think is, very important to think about in the context of implementing, developing these technologies is that we need to be more aware about the fact that AI integration requires more than just technical validation. Okay, so it requires more than paying attention to, again, how fair our data is, how safe our systems, how well can we protect privacy. So again, all of those things are essential to a well integrated AI system. But the real responsible integration requires more than paying attention to those things. It also requires work that actually can map the ways in which practice changes, how it transforms the way in which we interact, in which we build science, and in which we produce knowledge, in which we interact with patients. So it requires also work that identifies where judgment goes, again, where it moves from decision maker to evaluator or to accepting, certain kinds of recommendations. We need to see how we can preserve spaces for disagreement. Again, when things are normalized, when they become the default, it's very hard it requires courage, to disagree to present obstacles. So we need to build institutions and practices that allows people actually to disagree, to present challenges. We need to also make sure that we make dependence visible, so that we are aware of the ways in which our skills are dependent on AI. This is, the problem of de-skilling, how the kinds of practices that we have been doing, summarizing articles, reviewing evidence, checking the microscope, all of the kinds of practices that are embodied. Actually, we do them with our bodies, and that helps us to become skillful, to know how to do things in ways that might be even difficult. That's what experience does. Well, all of those, or many of those skills might be lost because efficiency obviously is very important, and AI systems can do this much faster. So efficiency is a good thing. We obviously want to be efficient, but I think it's important to realize that efficiency is a value. When we value efficiency, we are devaluing, doing things slowly, taking care, for longer of certain kinds of things. So that's okay. Obviously we want efficient practices in many contexts, but we need to realize that this is a trade-off, that we are just not, it's not that reality happens to be efficient, it's that we choose certain practices over others. So we need to make sure that, again, institutions actually cultivate the ability to question the results of AI, so that we are able to challenge in ways that don't lead to punishment, for example, or to damage to our reputations. So again, this is important, again, as I was saying, because the point is not just to make AI work properly, to do so accurately, but to shape systems and institutions that are using AI in ways that support reflective and autonomous reasoning, rather than in ways that undermine it. And if we don't pay attention to all of the ways in which AI affects, how we know, what we know, how it affects our agency, our responsibilities. If we ignore all of those things, obviously our ability to be reflective and to make autonomous decisions is going to be undermined in significant ways. So just to summarize, to complete this discussion, I just want to emphasize this issue about the importance of going beyond risk management. Responsible AI is not only about preventive failure, which again, it is very important. I am glad that there are many people working in trying to ensure that our data is better and that our systems are safer and that AI is more accurate in its prediction. So certainly we want that, but responsible AI integration is about more than that, not just about preventing failure. It's also about asking what kind of world is produced when AI succeeds, not when it fails, which we already ask, but when it succeeds. What is that we get when we get systems that work properly? So we don't want to be asking only, whether it is biased or safe or private, which is our usual concern. We also want to ask, what does it make visible? In which ways does it present reality to us, that hides certain kinds of things, so what kinds of things are visible, which ones are hidden, which kinds of things are made actionable, in which ways are we incited, prompted to act in particular ways. Who has to give reasons? In what context are reasons now demanded? Is it when I do what I think is the appropriate thing, or when I challenge what AI is telling me? What virtues does it reward? Are we thinking that we need people who are constant and courageous, or simply people who are dependable, who can follow instructions? What kinds of virtues are we going to be rewarding? And who remains responsible? Who are we going to be holding responsible when things go badly and when things go right? Who are we going to praise and who are we going to blame in the context of AI? So again, this obviously matters because the question is not only whether AI works, but what its success makes us, and our societies become. What kinds of societies we have when AI succeeds? And we want to reflect on that in order to be able to determine whether those are the kinds of societies that we want to build, and whether those are the kind of people who we want to become. So that is it. Thank you, everybody. And I am going to stop sharing. I have also some references. If anybody were interested in them, some references, ethics and philosophy of technology that are relevant to the discussion. So let me stop sharing now. Thank you.
That was excellent. Any questions?
Thank you.
I have a question. I don't know how to express it. Suppose AI is precision perfect. It now knows everything. And I am a physician, Gen Z and beyond, and I am addicted to AI. I have to use AI for everything. And now I don't really have to study that much because I can ask AI everything. And now I'm seeing patients. So I am asking AI, what is it if somebody has a round face and a buffalo hump? What is the diagnosis and how do I treat? And then the answer comes back, which is accurate. But what has happened here is that the clinician has not been trained sufficiently because they are relying on AI. They're leaving out some of the fine points that could change the diagnosis or the workup completely. And there's probably no way to avoid that, as students probably become more reliable on what AI says and less reliable on cognitive thinking, that this is a problem that is not so simple, that there are more ramifications to it than what they're asking AI.
Yep. I agree. I mean, again, this is the problem, that the skilling problem, one of the fascinating things about AI is that it substitutes cognitive abilities. This has not been very common in the overwhelming majority of our technologies. Most of our technologies substitute some other aspects of human, senses. They help us do things, faster, see farther, all of those kinds of things. But AI goes directly to cognitive competence, to the ability to make decisions. So this is something very new in many ways. And what is a little bit scary is how fast everything is happening, how focused we have been on the risks, these particular risks that I mentioned, which again, we ought to be attentive because, those things are very problematic. But how little attention we are paying to all of these aspects, in part because we are not thinking about them, but also in part because when we think about them, we either think that are too speculative, or that we will find some way to address those problems. And I think that, again, this is the problem with all technologies. Again, once they become normalized, once the conducts, the behaviors become normalized, new generations are going to be trained by people who are already trained by AI and who have been doing things, according to this particular conditions. So obviously, next generations are going to be trained in similar ways. So I think the problem of the skilling and that issue that you just presented, a clinician who has been relying on AI because AI is very accurate, how does it explain to patients, why it's making the choices that it's making? When is this going to, when are all of those kinds of activities, again, embodied activities that we do that help us learn, when are they going to be missed because we are not going to be using them? And this is going to, at a minimum, again, change how we do we perform biomedical sciences, how we do science, and certainly what kinds of world we build.
I guess that's the scare, is that AI will take over and you won't need physicians. You just need someone to ask the question.
Perhaps I don't know why, that the existential issue is not, when people are very concerned about machines are going to take over, my answer is always, we don't need machines to take over. In the sense they are going to dominate us, and the Terminator kind of scenario. Obviously, I don't know, maybe that could happen, but I don't know that that's the most serious concern that we have now. I think that the kinds of questions that I was presenting here, how we're going to attribute responsibility seems a huge deal, given that our interactions, the way we communicate, the way we act, the ways we interact as human beings are very dependent on responsibility and attributions, in being able to praise someone, blame someone, those are essential to our humanity. So I think that these more basic things seem to me much more concerning and worrisome than, Terminator kind scenarios.
No, I didn't mean that. I meant some doctors getting lazy, not thinking, asking the wrong question to AI and acting on it.
That might certainly become a problem. Again, that's not a far-fetched scenario, given that we know that has been happening with the smartphones. The many things that, generations before smartphones were able to do with ease, that kids can now not do at all. like complete sentences. So for sure that is going to change. That's the reason I was saying, what institutions need to do is to ensure that when we integrate AI, we do it in a way that does not eliminate the possibility of human beings, maintaining the kinds of skills that we think are important and essential to our humanity.
Did you want to go into the legal aspects?
Yeah, no, we have some more questions, Julian.
Okay, where are I can't see. Unfortunately. Yeah.
Alex Segarra has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Fascinating talk.
when we talk about AI, I think it's important to distinguish because we are almost always going to large language models these days.
Yes.
That controlled and through human loop AI is something that is clinically validated, and it's different when AI is in a closed loop when the human
Yes.
intervention is not as apparent as in other systems. You mentioned the element of potential displacement, whether it is in medicine, but also in so many different practices. Um, and there's always this dire consequence of, AI becoming too strong or too alarming of what the future would hold. But also there are also the positive aspect of how it could revolutionize. Um, what do you think in terms from the ethical needs? Because it seems that the element that you're putting out is the same as in robots, the automation part, right? We're thinking of driverless cars, of displacing humans, or in a case of an accident, who bears the responsibility in the same
Yeah.
way that a clinician that followed, I don't know, ChatGPT's advice and treated a patient, who bears that responsibility? The developer, the LLM, the clinician, etc. What is your take in terms of how we proceed in this future? Do you think that these issues would still persist, or it is part of our growing pains of understanding better the role that AI should come in tandem as a service to us as humans?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, I think indeed, other aspects like driving, or right now the discussion about weapons, robots that would kill. So in general, these are life and death decisions, actually, that are significant. This issue of responsibility is so significant because obviously assigning responsibility in those cases is very important. I am so somehow skeptical of us being able to address these problems in satisfactory ways. I do think, that there is lots of people working on these issues about attributions of responsibility. It's not the only issue. All of the, for me, these issues about what we understand as knowledge are very significant. What we take to be true is very significant. In a world where apparently nobody cares about truth, ensuring that we have some ways to determine what is true and what is not, seems very important to me. But I think, my take is, at a minimum, we ought to be calling attention to the importance of these aspects so that we allow spaces, institutions allow spaces to actually develop strategies to address them, in the best ways possible. I'm sure that we would develop, policies about responsibility, if for no other reason that in the context of medicine, questions about liability obviously are going to become very important. But obviously responsibility is more than just liability, legal liability. So I think that, what we should ask is, again, that we incorporate and integrate AI to serve goals that we have reflected upon, rather than for us to follow the goals that AI is pointing, which might be great. Again, none of the things that I said here makes the world a terrible place. Again, we have, AI that predicts disease, less mortality and morbidity. Who is going to complain about that? The thing is that, again, we are missing other things, losing other things that we might actually think we shouldn't be losing. And so those are the things that we should try to see. How can we make those things compatible, rather than just thinking, let's make sure that we get things that are efficient, because efficient is good, but we lose many other things that might also be good. I don't know whether there are any questions. I know that we are at 4, and Sean, are we supposed to be closing at 4?
Dr. Prado, do you want to keep going for
Well,
another couple minutes?
Unless there are other questions, we can close. Are there other questions? Okay. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you,
We'll see you
everybody.
again soon, Inma.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.